and welcome to Witness, the best of independent filmmaking from around the world. I'm Rida Fakhri. In the United States today, nearly 750,000 people are homeless, and roughly half of those suffer from mental illness. In Washington, D.C. alone, hundreds of people are living on the streets with real mental illness, adrift in the shadows of the monuments to greatness, representing the failure of health reforms begun decades ago. Those reforms began to falter when the treatment people needed to stay afloat was simply not provided. But now Washington, D.C. is trying to turn things around, and they're doing it using an old law that says if you're broke and crazy, the city and federal government have to care for you, provide housing, and even a small income. But how does this solution fit into a national health system that is otherwise pretty well broken?
This ended up being my home for the next 2 years.
Often, homeless people are seen as just a part of the cityscape, counted as a statistic, but also seen as a problem that cannot be solved. A couple of years ago, David Pertl was one of these statistics and part of the homeless population that is mentally ill.
The first time that I came here, it was about 10 degrees, and February is always the coldest month here in Washington.
Frequently tucked away and keeping warm over steam grates and along the outside of public buildings, David, like so many others, found a hidden place to sleep at night.
At 5:30 or 6 o'clock thereabouts, if I wasn't up already, someone would come out of the building and say, "Rise and shine!" And that was my wake-up call.
He was 29, a college graduate with a full-time job in management, living in Phoenix when he began to unravel.
I started developing symptoms in the spring of '04. I was unable to concentrate. I was unable to keep my mind on my work. I started collecting papers and magazines. I don't know, I guess you call it kind of hoarding, and I really started to withdraw into my own little worlds. Started hearing voices, auditory hallucinations, and fairly quickly it just got out of control. I couldn't function, and I lost my job that summer, and right after that I was out on the street.
David wandered the country, jumping freight trains, spending time in Las Vegas and Texas, Chicago, St. Louis, and New York City.
The first week that I was in New York, I was sleeping in a stairwell, and a group of kids, probably late teens, came down the stairwell and woke me up by hitting me with an aluminum bat. And they beat me about my head and shoulders.
Once he made it to Washington, he frequently sought protection at night at the foot of this giant statue.
This is where I ate.
Every morning, he headed to the National Mall to see what he could find for breakfast.
A lot of buses come through here with kids, and they'll have their little box lunches here on the National Mall. Kids, they never eat their fruit. It's something you don't get when you're homeless is fresh fruits. That'd be great. You could score like a dozen apples and oranges off of those, or you know, half-eaten ham sandwiches. After breakfast every day, I would come in here to the National Gallery of Art, and there's a bathroom on the second floor. I could go in and lock the door and just get myself washed up. And then I'd spend the rest of the day, I would go to the different galleries and sit down and draw. I would reproduce like the Rembrandt. There's a portrait of Rembrandt, which is my favorite painting in this entire museum.
But appreciating great art did nothing to slow the progress of David's schizophrenia.
One of the things about being on the streets with schizophrenia is the longer that you're not treated and the longer that you're isolated, the more severe it can get.
And then, in the most unexpected place and the most unexpected way, it all changed.
This is the National Museum of the American Indian, where I'm no longer allowed. In 2006, I shoplifted a half a pound of smoked salmon from the gift shop. And there's like 2 floors of gift shop. It's all gift shop, but that's neither here nor there. It comes in a box about this big. I tried to slip it out of my jacket. I was very bad at it. Definitely no career as a thief, but it was the greatest day of my life because it was the first time that anyone had noticed that I needed help. From the people who caught me, all the way up to the judge, the probation officer. They saw something that even I didn't see then, which was, you know, this guy needs some serious help. Very often people will ask me, why is it that if you were hearing voices, if you were experiencing delusions, that you didn't realize there was something wrong with you? I tell them it's because I was experiencing delusions. When you're trying to figure out if there's something wrong with your brain, using your brain, then usually you're not going to get the right answer.
All right, there we go, man. Have a good day.
How many of these men are homeless because they are mentally ill? Some say nearly all. Gunther Stern is the director of the Georgetown Ministry Center, which works with the homeless.
Just about everybody we see is mentally ill.
They call me the Georgetown fisherman. I fish for change.
Most of the people that we see on the street have been on the street for a long time. They're on the street because of their mental illness.
Every day, a team from the center makes the rounds, handing out water, building trust, trying to convince these men that coming in from the winter's cold or the summer's heat and getting treatment is in their best interest. Following his arrest, David was locked up overnight before his appearance in district court.
It was the first time that I had ever actually slept under a roof in like 2 years.
The judge sentenced him to probation and ordered him to see a psychiatrist and begin medication.
I'm very, very fortunate in that this happened because I wouldn't have done it otherwise.
It was another year after David went to court that things changed for the mentally ill homeless population in Washington, D.C. Judge Joan Goldfrank presides.
We had seen an increase in the number of defendants on the criminal calendar who had serious mental illness and would end up in jail.
The city of Washington set up a mental health court. It's specifically designed to deal with mentally ill lawbreakers, people who often commit minor crimes and need treatment, not jail. The court reforms came a little too late for David. The public clinic where he was ordered to seek treatment was overcrowded and understaffed. The psychiatrist overwhelmed.
He had so many people that he had to deal with every day, he didn't have time to care. I guess it was the second visit that I felt like I was getting suicidal, basically. And he said, you know, I'll see you in 3 months. Here's your Zoloft, I'll see you in 3 months. And I was like, well, you know, maybe, maybe not, it depends.
Eventually, he was referred here to Green Door, a private provider of mental health services funded by the city.
It was really amazing. It was night and day. These folks really sit down with you and look at your entire life about not just how you're doing mentally, physically, emotionally, what are your goals and how can they help you accomplish them. They're more than just a psychiatric outpatient service. They specialize in taking folks who are on the street and helping them transition into life off the street.
These days, virtually all the outpatient clinics in Washington are run by private contractors. Stephen Barron, director of the department, says the city is getting out of the business of providing services directly.
It's hard to monitor and regulate yourself. And it is our job to create the system, fund the system, drive the system, hold the system accountable.
Barron is proud of the city's record on housing for the mentally ill.
If you look around the country and look at most public mental health systems that provide affordable housing to its users or consumers or adults with serious mental illness, you'll find the district, I believe we have to be in the top 10, and that's being modest. We could be in the top 5. We, as a department, make available almost 1,600 units of affordable housing.
David Pirtle, after spending 2 years on the streets, lucked into one such pilot program started by the city.
You're going to find 25 people who qualified, and we're likely to be successful.
But he knows a lot of people are afraid to have someone like him next door.
They don't want homeless people living in their neighborhood. And I always tell folks, you know, if they're living there, they're not homeless anymore. They're not homeless. It's like homelessness is not an ethnicity, and it's not a disease. It's just a condition. You don't have a home, you're homeless. You have a home, you're not homeless anymore. I'm sure that they're imagining that person that they see on the street corner with a cup, who's intoxicated, who's dirty. They're not thinking of them as a human being.
He recognizes that without the public funding and publicly financed medical care, he could easily spiral once more into a life on the streets.
There's no cure for schizophrenia. It's something that you just have to deal with for the rest of your life. Medication only does so much. I still have voices that I hear all the time.
Join me again after the break, here on Witness. Welcome back to this edition of Witness. I'm Rida Fakhri. For the mentally ill and homeless, getting off the street is only one part of the challenge. The hardest part is usually staying off the streets, especially in Washington, D.C.
I was homeless, I had a mental illness, and I had a drug addiction. I had been homeless for probably like 15 years or a little longer.
Nellie Floyd is still at the beginning of her uneven journey off the streets and still struggles to navigate her way to a stable life while being treated for her mental illness.
In this alley right here, I used to sit on the side of this alley right here and drink early wee hours of the morning because you could sit here and be safe.
She recalls staggering around the city at night, wishing for a place to stay.
It took me a long time to be able to understand what I had to go through in life to succeed in something, because I never could succeed in anything. You know, I would start things, but I could never finish them. I'm bipolar, schizophrenic, so sometimes it would be, I think that I'm on top of the world and everything is okay, and then at other times it's like I didn't even want it to exist. I didn't want to have to go through life being without and being homeless.
She is exactly the kind of hard case most advocates would guess has little chance of succeeding. She's been arrested many times, been in and out of jail for years.
And this is my daughter.
She has borne 4 children, ranging in age from 12 to 28. She has raised none of them.
And the last one is in the system.
She says she became addicted to drugs and alcohol to calm the voices in her head.
The voices were very real, and they're still very real. They're still very real, and it's frustrating, you know, to listen to them, even with a sober mind and housing and everything. I go through therapy now with Pathways. They have a good therapist that I'm working with, but I'm on the medication, and I take the medication as prescribed. Anything that'll change my mood, I'm addicted to. But I still hear the voices, and sometimes they really seem so real. It's hard for me to block them out, and I will act on them, you know. But I'm trying to now being able to distinguish what is good and what is bad, what is fantasy and what is real.
Come by next week so we can sit more in private.
Psychiatrist Dr. Arda Kasachi with the Washington, D.C. Department of Mental Health works to coax those still on the street into treatment and housing.
At least we can talk. Okay. I'm not pushing you for medicine. It's a very long process. Sometimes takes years, and You need many components together to have a successful outcome, you know, housing, medication, follow-up.
Others believe that waiting for years until a mentally ill person voluntarily seeks treatment means almost certain failure.
We are a program that happens to work with people who are mentally ill and homeless.
Sam Timberis of Pathways to Housing says the most effective way to get homeless people off the street is to give them a home first.
Most people who are homeless and mentally ill, when you ask them what is the thing that is most troubling you, they will not say their mental illness. They will say, it's because my feet are killing me. I have no place to sleep. I haven't eaten in days. I need those things. I need a place to live. I can get my life together. From that perspective, what causes a large number of people to be homeless and mentally ill is not so much their illness, it's their poverty. There's no affordable housing in the country. There's no subsidized housing. There's no resources for people. So there's lots of people who are homeless, all of them desperately poor. Among them, a high number of people with mental illness.
Nellie Floyd is a good example of why the need is so urgent for so many.
My life was spiraling down to suicidal, just like I didn't even want it to exist. I was all over. My addiction carried me places that I didn't want to be. I wouldn't sleep until I passed out somewhere. I would meet a person and they would allow me to come home with them and take a shower and get a little rest. And sometimes it was for exchange for a favor, but sometimes it wasn't.
And then 2 outreach workers from Pathways to Housing told her they'd get her off the streets that day. First in a hotel room, then in her own apartment.
Pathways was like a blessing and a miracle.
Up to that time, everybody had been doing treatment, then housing. We just did the housing part first. People said, oh, you're doing it backwards. I said, right. And we put people into housing and then provided the treatment. We don't require that you're clean and sober in order to get this apartment. There are lots of people in Washington that are not clean and sober living in housing. If we had a clean and sober rule for everybody that was living in Washington apartments, you can imagine that this park would be quite filled. It turned out much, much better, because when people were housed and comfortable and not having to worry about their survival needs or where they were going to sleep that night, they were able to engage in a conversation about what they needed next.
What Nellie needed next was to get saner and sober, and that proved to be easier said than done. Even with their support, she didn't last long in her first apartment.
I ended up getting arrested, for my drug addiction, for soliciting.
I still didn't get it, and I'm crazy. I was still using, but they still stuck by me.
Finally, she realized this might be her last chance.
But now it seems like that I'm more focused, I'm more willing to work towards improvement. I like going in my kitchen. I like taking a shower. I like laying down, going to sleep on the inside.
And from the safety and security of a more stable life and in treatment, Nellie can walk around her old neighborhood and reflect on how far she's come.
And when I was on the street, this church, the preacher, he took me in, they fed me, and they kept my clothes. And I'm back, but this time I'm a different person. So I come here for my worship, my services. This is the dollar store that I stole from out of. And the lady had to chase me. Now me and her are the best of friends. She trusts me in her store. I come here and get my hair cut, and I sit in the first chair. Hi, fine. I sit at that bus stop, right, for a long time when I didn't have a place to go.
I think any good clinician will tell you that whether the person is poor or rich, people will take medication if they find it's helping them and it's on their terms. And I think that when you move to an involuntary medication format, you're basically coercing someone to take medication. This happens all the time with homeless people, by the way. You want housing? Take medication. So you're not taking medication because you think it's helping you with your mental illness. You're taking medication because you actually want the housing.
Critical support at the right moment is something the city's legal system has come to recognize as well.
When the first time a defendant is before me, when they've been transferred from the criminal court here, I try to find out what they need. Are they connected to mental health services? Do they need to go to detox? Do they need inpatient drug treatment for short term, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Do they need outpatient drug treatment? What do they need? And I try to talk to them, find out what they need. And frequently people say, I need housing. When we do get people housing, because it's one of the issues we try to work on, it's great support for people.
Critics of these government programs say it is expensive and creates a nanny state for the homeless and mentally ill. But there are those who say, in fact, it is not just effective, but it's actually cheaper.
$18,000 a year for an apartment with a lot of support. That includes the rent. And $120,000 for a year in a jail cell. So, or hospitalization, much worse. So that it's not only a more humane, but it's also a more effective intervention.
I would be out there in the street, half dead, or probably dead by now.
The Pathways to Housing program in Washington, D.C. is small but growing. They've placed about 250 in housing. But this is a small figure in a city where the estimated homeless population numbers at more than 20,000.
How can there be enough money to end homelessness? I would ask, how can there be enough money to get General Motors out of a problem, or how can there be enough money to get the banks out of their difficulties? There's money when we have the political will and determination to produce it. The money it would take to solve homelessness in America is actually much less than the money we've just spent on those other problems.
For those who are living right at the edge of need, all of this support is vital, but still doesn't feel permanent.
The hardest part of my day is getting up.
That's it for this edition. Thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time here on Witness.